The silk felt wrong against my skin. I stood before the cracked mirror in the servants' quarters, my fingers trembling as they smoothed over the deep crimson fabric that clung to my body like a second skin. The dress had been a gift, or perhaps a curse, from Lady Morgana, the king's sister, who had thrust it into my arms that morning with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Wear this tonight," she'd said, her voice honey-sweet and razor-sharp. "You'll blend in better at the gathering." Blend in. As if I could ever blend in anywhere within these stone walls that had been my prison for 3 years. The fabric whispered as I moved, a sound like secrets being shared in the dark. Red, of all colors, red. The color of blood, of passion, of things that slaves like me had no right to claim. My pale blonde hair fell in loose waves down my back, still damp from the washing I'd been permitted. Another unusual kindness that set my nerves on edge. Everything about today felt like a trap waiting to spring. Through the narrow window, I could hear the gathering already beginning in the great hall below. Music drifted up through the floors, accompanied by laughter and the clink of crystal. The annual moon gathering, they called it. A celebration where the Alpha King opened his court to allied pacts, nobles, and dignitaries from across the territories. For one night, the palace transformed from a fortress into something that almost resembled joy. For everyone except those of us who served. I thought of my mother then, as I always did when fear threatened to consume me. Her voice, soft and steady even in her final days. "Compassion isn't weakness, little one. When everyone else shows their teeth, show your heart. That's where real strength lives." She'd been dead 5 years now. Sometimes I wondered if she'd been wrong. "Eliana!" The sharp voice of Mistress Carden cut through my thoughts. "Stop admiring yourself and get down here. The wine won't serve itself." I took one last look at my reflection, a stranger in red, pale and fragile as porcelain, and hurried from the room. The great hall blazed with candlelight and magic. Hundreds of flames danced in crystal chandeliers overhead, casting golden shadows across the assembled crowd. Wolves in human skin, every one of them. Their power filling the air until it pressed against my lungs like a physical weight. I could feel their dominance, their barely restrained wildness, even as they laughed and drank and pretended at civility. I kept my head down as I navigated through the crowd with my tray of wine glasses, making myself small, invisible. It was a skill I'd perfected over years of servitude, the art of being present without being seen. Most wolves looked through me rather than at me, their gazes sliding past as if I were merely another piece of furniture. But tonight felt different. Tonight, eyes followed me. I felt their weight like brands against my skin. Conversations paused as I passed. Whispers started in my wake, too soft for my human ears to catch, but there nonetheless, the red dress. It had marked me somehow, pulled me from the safety of shadows into dangerous light. Well. A hand caught my wrist as I tried to pass, fingers circling with casual cruelty. "What do we have here?" Lord Cassius, one of the king's council members, known for his particular appetite for terrorizing those who couldn't fight back. His breath reeked of wine and something darker as he pulled me closer, his other hand reaching for my waist. "Please, my lord," I whispered, trying to pull away without spilling the wine. "I need to serve. You can serve me just fine." His grip tightened, and I felt claws prick against my skin through the thin fabric. "Such a pretty little thing. Tell me, does that dress come off as easily as it went on?" Fear flooded my mouth with the taste of copper. Around us, other nobles watched with varying degrees of interest and amusement. No one would help. No one ever helped. I thought of my mother's words, "Show your heart." "My lord," I said, forcing my voice steady even as my hands shook. "I'm certain your mate wouldn't appreciate such attention being paid to a servant. I saw her earlier, such an elegant woman. She was looking for you. It was a gamble. A dangerous one, but something flickered in Cassius's eyes. Calculation, perhaps a touch of fear, and his grip loosened just enough. "Watch yourself, girl," he hissed, but he released me, turning away to scan the crowd for his mate. I didn't wait. I slipped through the press of bodies, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. The tray rattled in my hands, wine sloshing dangerously close to the rim of the crystal glasses. That's when the room changed. It was like a ripple moving through water. A sudden hush that started at the great doors and spread outward in waves. The music didn't stop, but it softened. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every head turned, every spine straightened. He had arrived. Alpha King Damon Ashford. I'd seen him before, of course. You couldn't serve in the palace for 3 years without catching glimpses of the king. But I'd never been this close, never been in the same room when his full attention was present. He stood in the doorway like a storm-given form, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell to his collar, and eyes that seemed to capture and hold the candlelight. Power radiated from him in waves that made my knees weak, an authority so absolute it felt like gravity itself bending to his will. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful, sharp edges and brutal strength wrapped in elegant clothing. A predator who ruled because nature itself had ordained it so, and he was looking directly at me. No, not looking. Staring. His eyes, gold-flecked amber that seemed to glow in the candlelight, fixed on me with an intensity that froze the blood in my veins. The room might as well have been empty for all the attention he paid to anyone else. His gaze traveled down the length of the red dress, back up to my face, and something in his expression shifted. Fury, pure, absolute fury. He moved through the crowd like a blade through silk, nobles scrambling to clear his path. Each step was deliberate, controlled, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands flexed at his sides as if restraining himself from shifting into claws. Everyone watched. The entire hall had become an audience to whatever was about to happen, and I was center stage in a performance I'd never auditioned for. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell him, pine and smoke and something wild that made my instincts scream at me to run. The tray trembled in my hands, wine finally spilling over the edge of one glass, to splash red against the marble floor, like blood, like an omen. "Where are you going in that dress?" His voice was low, dangerous, each word precisely controlled. But underneath that control, I heard something else, something that sounded almost like panic. "Answer me." The room held its breath. I couldn't look at him, couldn't meet those burning amber eyes. So I did what I'd been taught. I dropped my gaze to the floor, made myself small, spoke in the voice of someone who knew her place. "I was told to serve at the gathering, Your Majesty. Lady Morgana gave me the dress. I meant no offense. Look at me." It wasn't a request. Commands from an Alpha King carried the weight of compulsion, impossible to resist. My eyes lifted against my will, meeting his, and the world narrowed to just the two of us. Up close, I could see that his fury wasn't simple anger. There was something else in his expression, something raw and wounded and terrible. His jaw clenched, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. His pupils had dilated, the wolf rising too close to the surface. "You don't wear red," he said, and his voice had gone rough, barely human. "You don't. Who gave you permission? Who told you that you could—" He stopped himself, breathing hard through his nose. Around us, the court watched in shocked silence. I'd never seen anyone speak to the king like this. I'd never seen him lose his composure, never seen the iron control slip even for a moment. But it was slipping now. "Your Majesty," I whispered, confused and terrified in equal measure. "I don't understand. If I've done something wrong." "Wrong?" He laughed, and it was the most broken sound I'd ever heard. "You have no idea what you've done. No idea what you look like standing there in that dress." His hand lifted, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. Instead, his fingers hovered near my face, trembling slightly, close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin, but not quite touching, like he wanted to reach for me but didn't trust himself to make contact. "She wore red," he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "The last time I saw her, she wore red. Her. Someone else. Someone who had mattered enough to carve this wound into him." Understanding crashed over me like a wave. This wasn't about me at all. I was just a ghost, a memory wearing the wrong color, a reminder of something, someone he'd lost. Before I could speak, before I could apologize or explain or do anything at all, the great doors burst open. A guard stumbled through, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, his eyes wild with panic. "Your Majesty," he gasped. "The eastern border. We're under attack." And just like that, the moment shattered. The king's attention snapped away from me, his entire demeanor transforming in an instant. The wounded man vanished, replaced by the warrior, the alpha, the king who had held these territories through a dozen wars. "How many?" he demanded. "Hundreds, maybe more." They came out of nowhere. Rogues, but organized, led by someone. They're heading for the villages. Demon turned back to me one last time. His expression was unreadable now, locked down tight, but his eyes still burned with that terrible intensity. "This isn't over," he said. Then he was gone, striding from the hall with half his guard following, leaving chaos and confusion in his wake. I stood alone in my red dress, wine still dripping from my tray, while the court erupted into frightened whispers around me. Lady Morgana materialized at my elbow, her smile sharp as glass. "Well," she said softly, her breath cold against my ear. "That was unexpected. Tell me, little slave, did you enjoy your moment in the spotlight?" I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because I was too busy wondering why the Alpha King had looked at me like I was both his salvation and his destruction, and why, despite everything, my heart was still racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. The palace became a different place after that night. I woke the next morning to find guards stationed at every entrance, patrols doubled, and a tension in the air so thick it could choke. The attack on the eastern border had been repelled, but not before 3 villages had been damaged and dozens injured. Whispers raced through the servants' quarters. Rogues growing bolder, organized resistance, someone powerful enough to challenge the king's authority. But all I could think about was the way he'd looked at me in that red dress. I'd returned it to Lady Morgana immediately after the gathering ended, folding it carefully despite my shaking hands. She'd taken it with that same knowing smile, asking no questions, offering no explanations. I had the distinct feeling I'd been a piece in some game I didn't understand, moved across a board I couldn't see. "Eliana, stop daydreaming and finish those floors." Mistress Carden's voice cracked like a whip across the kitchen. "The King's Council meets today, and everything must be perfect." I dropped to my knees with my brush and bucket, scrubbing at stones that were already clean. Around me, the other servants worked in unusual silence. Mira, who normally chattered endlessly about court gossip, kept her head down and her mouth shut. Thomas, the stable boy who sometimes snuck me extra bread, wouldn't meet my eyes. They'd all seen what happened in the Great Hall. They'd all witnessed the king's fury directed at me, a mere human slave in a borrowed dress. And they were afraid that whatever doom I'd brought upon myself might splash onto them. By midday, my hands were raw, and my back ached from hours of scrubbing. I was carrying a basket of linens through the east corridor when I heard voices drifting from the council chamber, low, urgent, angry, reckless to leave the palace so exposed. That was Lord Cassius, his voice sharp with accusation. What if the attack was a diversion? What if they'd struck here instead? Then we would have defended our home. A different voice, younger, edged with frustration. "We can't cower behind walls every time rogues bare their teeth. That's easy for you to say, Rowan. You're not responsible for..." "Enough." The king's voice cut through the argument like a blade. Even muffled by stone and wood, it carried absolute authority. We've dealt with the immediate threat. Now we focus on finding who organized it and why. Perhaps we should consider the timing, Your Majesty. Lady Morgana's honeyed tones made my skin prickle. The attack came during the moon gathering, when our attention was divided. When certain distractions were present in the hall. Silence. Heavy and terrible. "What are you implying, sister?" The king's voice had gone dangerously soft. "Nothing untoward, brother. Merely that our enemies are clever. They know how to exploit weaknesses, even weaknesses we don't realize we have." I should have kept walking, should have hurried past and pretended I'd heard nothing. Instead, I stood frozen in the hallway, barely breathing, my heart hammering against my ribs. "If you have something to say, Morgana, say it plainly." Another voice, the one called Rowan. "Stop dancing around with riddles." Very well. I'm suggesting that perhaps we should examine everyone who had access to the palace last night, including the servants, particularly those who were conspicuous. They were talking about me, suggesting I was somehow involved with the attack. The basket slipped from my numb fingers, linens tumbling across the floor with a soft sound that might as well have been a thunderclap in the quiet corridor. The council chamber door burst open. Rowan appeared first, a man in his late 20s with auburn hair and keen gray eyes that fixed on me immediately. Behind him came Lord Cassius, Lady Morgana with her knowing smile, and finally the king himself. Demon Ashford looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his jaw was rough with stubble, but those amber eyes were just as intense as they'd been the night before, just as capable of pinning me in place like a butterfly on display. "You," he said flatly. "What are you doing here?" The linens, Your Majesty." I dropped into a curtsy, keeping my eyes down. "I was just passing through. I didn't mean to disturb. How much did you hear?" Lady Morgana stepped forward, her silk skirts whispering across the stones. "The truth now. These are matters of security. Nothing, my lady. Just voices, no words. I swear it." "She's lying." Cassius moved closer, and I could smell the wine on him even now, mid-afternoon. "Look at her. Guilty as sin." I would never." My voice cracked. "I've served this house for 3 years. I've never given anyone reason to doubt my loyalty." "Loyalty?" Morgana laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "You're human, dear child. You have no concept of true loyalty. No bond to hold you. No instinct to guide you. You're as likely to betray us as a dog is to bite the hand that feeds it." Rage flared hot in my chest, momentarily burning through the fear. My mother taught me that loyalty isn't about instinct or bonds. It's about choice. And I choose to serve honorably, even when I'm given no honor in return. The words were out before I could stop them. Mistress Carden would beat me for such insolence, and these nobles could do far worse. But Rowan laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and approval. "Well said. I like this one. You like everyone," Morgana said coldly. "It's your most persistent weakness." "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply recognize courage when I see it." Rowan turned to the king. "She's not a spy, demon. Look at her. She's terrified and defiant in equal measure. Hardly the demeanor of someone working with rogues." The king hadn't spoken, hadn't moved. He simply stood there watching me with an expression I couldn't read, something complex and troubled moving behind his eyes. "Leave us," he said finally. "Your Majesty," Cassius began. "Leave us." Each word dropped like a stone. "All of you. Now." Morgana's smile turned brittle, but she curtsied and swept from the corridor. Cassius followed with a murderous glance in my direction. Rowan hesitated, his gray eyes moving between the king and me, some unspoken question in his expression. "Go, Rowan," Demon said, softer this time. "Please." The younger man nodded and left, though his footsteps lingered just out of sight down the corridor. Protection or curiosity, I couldn't tell. And then I was alone with the Alpha King. The silence stretched between us like a living thing. I kept my eyes on the scattered linens, on my hands still red from scrubbing, on anything except his face. "Do you know why she gave you that dress?" His voice was quiet now, stripped of its usual command, almost human. I shook my head. "Because she knew exactly what it would do to me." He moved closer, his boots entering my field of vision. "My sister is many things, but subtle isn't one of them. She wanted to see if she could break my control. And she very nearly succeeded." "I don't understand, Your Majesty." "No, you wouldn't." He was close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from him, the barely contained power that made my instincts scream conflicting messages. Run, submit, stay, fight. 5 years ago, I had a mate. Her name was Elena. She was human, like you. Blonde hair, pale skin, too gentle for this world of teeth and claws. My breath caught. Elena, the ghost I'd resembled in red. She died during a rogue attack, wore a red dress to a celebration the night before, laughing and dancing like she had forever ahead of her. The next day, they tore her apart, while I was too far away to save her. Horror and grief crashed over me in equal waves. I'm so sorry. Don't. His hand lifted, stopping just short of touching my shoulder. Don't apologize for things that aren't your fault. Don't apologize for looking like her, or for wearing a color you didn't choose, or for being human in a world that sees that as weakness. I finally looked up, meeting his eyes. This close, I could see gold flecks in the amber, could see the exhaustion and pain he carried like armor. This was a man who'd learned that love meant loss, that gentleness got you killed, that walls were safer than windows. You're not her, he said, and something in his voice made my chest ache. But for a moment last night, seeing you in that dress, I forgot. I forgot that she's gone, forgot that I buried her 5 years ago, forgot every reason I've built these walls. What does that mean? I whispered. It means my sister is more dangerous than any rogue army. It means she's trying to manipulate me through you. And it means... He stopped, jaw clenching before continuing. It means you need to be careful. Very careful. Because I can't protect you if you're being used as a weapon against me. I don't want to be used as anything, Your Majesty. I just want to survive. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. That makes two of us. He stepped back, the distance between us growing to something more appropriate, more safe. The king's mask slid back into place, authority reasserting itself. You'll be reassigned, he said. No more general servant duties. You'll work in the library, cataloging and maintaining the records. It's quiet, isolated, and you'll report directly to Scholar Benedict. No one else. It was protection disguised as a command, a way to keep me away from his sister's schemes and the council's suspicions. Thank you, Your Majesty. Don't thank me yet. The library is 3 floors up East Tower. Benedict is older than the stones themselves and twice as stubborn. You'll earn your keep. He turned to leave, then paused, his back still to me. The red dress suited you, he said quietly. That's what made it so dangerous. You looked like you belonged in this world, like you could survive among wolves, like maybe... He trailed off, shaking his head. Never mind. Report to Benedict tomorrow morning. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the corridor with scattered linens and a heart that wouldn't stop racing. I gathered the cloth slowly, my hands steadier now, my mind spinning with everything I'd learned. The king had loved a human woman, had lost her violently, and his sister had deliberately dressed me as a ghost to wound him. This palace was a battlefield, I realized, not just against rogues and rival packs, but against each other, against wounds that never healed, and grief that turned to weapons. And somehow, impossibly, I'd been drafted as a soldier. That night, I lay in my narrow bed while the other servants slept around me. Mira had whispered a tentative, "Are you all right?" before blowing out the candle, the first word she'd spoken to me all day. I'd nodded, said I was fine, let her believe the lie. But I wasn't fine. I was thinking about amber eyes and buried pain, about a human woman brave enough to love an alpha king and foolish enough to think love could protect her, about red dresses and the ghosts they summoned, about the way Demon had looked at me, not with the cruelty I'd learned to expect from nobles, not with the indifference I'd learned to endure, but with something raw, something that saw me as more than a servant, more than a human, more than invisible. It terrified me, because my mother had also taught me that the most dangerous thing in the world wasn't teeth or claws, or even death itself. It was hope. And against every instinct of self-preservation I'd honed over 3 years of servitude, I felt hope stirring in my chest like a hibernating creature waking to spring. The library would be safer, I told myself. Quieter. Away from the games and schemes of court. But even as I closed my eyes and sought sleep, I knew that safety was an illusion. Because nothing in this palace was truly safe. Especially not for a human girl who'd accidentally reminded the Alpha King that his heart, however buried, could still break. The library existed in a different world. 3 floors up in the East Tower, it occupied a vast circular room where dust motes danced in shafts of morning light, and the smell of old parchment and leather hung heavy in the air. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, creating narrow corridors of knowledge that wound through the space like a labyrinth. It was quiet here, not the tense, fearful quiet of servants trying to avoid notice, but a peaceful silence that felt almost sacred. Scholar Benedict was indeed older than the stones. He met me at the heavy oak door with eyes sharp as a hawk's, despite the lines carved deep into his weathered face. His hair was white as winter snow, pulled back in a tail, and he wore simple robes that had probably been brown once, but had faded to an indeterminate gray. "So you're the girl who made the king forget himself," he said without preamble. "Come in. Don't touch anything until I tell you what's safe to touch." I followed him through the maze of shelves, my eyes wide. I'd never seen so many books in my life. In the servants' quarters, we'd had perhaps 3 books shared among 20 people. Here, there must have been thousands. "Can you read?" Benedict asked, not unkindly. "Yes, sir. My mother taught me before I came here." "Good. Basic literacy is essential. Can you write?" "Yes, sir." "Better. Can you keep your mouth shut about what you read and see in here?" I met his sharp gaze directly. "I've survived 3 years in this palace, sir. Discretion is the only armor I have." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair enough. You'll do. The king said you needed somewhere quiet, away from prying eyes and scheming nobles. This is the quietest place in the entire palace. Even the wolves avoid it. Too many words, not enough action for their taste." He led me to a desk near one of the tall windows, where stacks of documents waited. "Your task is simple in concept, torturous in execution. These are records from the last 50 years. Treaties, land agreements, birth records, death records, everything that makes this kingdom function. They need to be cataloged, cross-referenced, and organized. Some are damaged. Some are in languages you won't understand. But you'll do your best, and you'll ask me when you need help." "Yes, sir." "And girl?" He turned back, his expression serious. "The king doesn't extend protection lightly. Whatever happened between you two, don't take it for granted. Don't abuse it. And don't break his heart again. He's had enough of that for 3 lifetimes. Again, as if I'd somehow been responsible for Elena's death, for the wound that still bled 5 years later. I never meant to hurt him, sir. No one ever does. That's what makes it hurt so much more." Benedict moved toward his own desk in the far corner. "Now get to work. Lunch is at midday. Don't eat near the books." The days that followed fell into a rhythm I'd never known before. I arrived each morning as dawn broke, climbing the tower stairs with burning legs and lungs. Benedict would grunt a greeting and point me toward whichever stack of documents needed attention. Then silence would descend, broken only by the scratch of quills, the rustle of pages, and occasionally Benedict's muttered curses when he found some particularly frustrating historical error. It was the first peace I'd known since my mother died. No one bothered us in the tower. No Mistress Carden with her sharp tongue and sharper switch. No nobles with wandering hands and cruel smiles. No Lady Morgana watching me with calculating eyes. Just books and dust and the slow accumulation of knowledge. I learned things I'd never expected. The kingdom's history stretched back over 1,000 years, through wars and plagues and periods of prosperity. I read about the Alpha bloodline, the way power passed from father to son in an unbroken chain of dominance. I learned about pack structures, about the bonds that tied wolves together in ways humans could never fully understand. And I learned about humans like me, the ones who'd found themselves in this world of teeth and claws. Most didn't survive long. Those who did either became mates to powerful wolves or learned to make themselves indispensable in other ways. Elena's name appeared in the records from 5 years ago, a marriage certificate, written in elegant script. Elena Marie Winters, human, bonded to demon Alexander Ashford, Alpha King, on the 3rd day of spring. I traced the letters with one finger, careful not to smudge the ink. She'd been real. Not just a ghost or a memory, but a woman who'd stood in some ceremony and promised herself to a king. Who'd believed, if only for a brief time, that love could bridge the gap between species. The death record came 6 months later. One line, brutally simple. Elena Marie Ashford, killed during rogue incursion, Eastern Territory. No details, no explanation. Just existence and then absence, the space between life and death reduced to a few words in a ledger. "You're crying on the documents." Benedict's voice made me jump. He stood beside my desk, holding a handkerchief that had probably once been white. "Here, and be more careful. Tears damage the ink." "I'm sorry, I took the cloth, wiping at my eyes. "I didn't mean to. You found her records. It wasn't a question." Benedict pulled up a stool and sat with a heavy sigh. "I wondered if you would. Most people avoid reading about the dead. But you're not most people, are you? I just wanted to understand." "Understand what?" "Why the king looked at you like you were a ghost. Why his sister dressed you in red. Why everyone in this palace walks on eggshells around the subject of Elena. All of it, I suppose." Benedict was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his knee. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years and secrets. Elena was unexpected. She came to the palace as a translator, one of the few humans who could speak the old languages, the ones we use in treaties and formal documents. Demon was new to the throne then, his father having died just months before. Young, grieving, carrying the weight of an entire kingdom. He paused, lost in memory. She made him laugh. Can you imagine that? Our stern, controlled king, laughing like a boy at some joke this slip of a human girl told him. Within weeks, he was besotted. Within months, they were bonded. It scandalized half the court, an alpha king taking a human mate. But Demon didn't care. For the first time in his life, he chose what he wanted over what was expected. My throat ached. What happened? What always happens when wolves love humans. She was vulnerable, and our enemies knew it. A rogue pack attacked one of the eastern villages. A diversion, we learned later. While Demon was defending the border, another group struck the smaller outpost where Elena had gone to help negotiate with a farming community. She was brave, tried to help the others escape. She nearly succeeded. "Nearly," I whispered. "Nearly isn't enough in this world. By the time Demon reached her, she was already gone. They say he held her body for 3 days. Wouldn't let anyone take her from him. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, wouldn't speak. When he finally emerged, he was different, harder. The part of him that could love had been buried with her. I thought of amber eyes looking at me with such terrible recognition, of the way his hand had trembled near my face, afraid to touch, afraid to remember. "Until you appeared in that red dress," Benedict said softly, and reminded him that the dead don't stay buried as well as we'd like. I didn't mean to hurt him, I know, but intention doesn't matter much when it comes to pain. Benedict stood, his joints creaking. "Be careful, girl. Morgana isn't done with whatever game she's playing. And the king? He's fighting a battle between what he wants and what he fears. You're caught in the middle." That night, I couldn't sleep. The other servants snored around me, exhausted from their daily labors, but my mind wouldn't quiet. I kept seeing those records, that simple notation of a life ended too soon, kept thinking about a woman who'd been brave enough to love despite the danger. Had she known? Had Elena understood that loving Demon made her a target, or had she been naive enough to think love could protect her? The questions followed me through the next day and the next. A week passed in the library's peace. Then, too, I fell into the work, losing myself in the rhythm of organizing and cataloging. Benedict taught me the old languages, patient with my fumbling pronunciation. We took lunch together at his desk, and he told me stories of the palace's history that never made it into the official records. I learned that Rowan, the auburn-haired man from the council, was Demon's cousin and closest friend. That Lady Morgana had wanted the throne herself, but been passed over by tradition and law. That Lord Cassius had once been loyal until his own mate died in childbirth, leaving him bitter and cruel. Everyone in this palace carried wounds. Everyone wore their scars like armor. On the 15th day, Demon came to the library. I was standing on a ladder, reaching for a volume on the top shelf, when I heard Benedict's voice below. "Your Majesty." An unexpected pleasure. My heart stopped. My hands froze on the book. "I need the treaty documents from the Northern Territories," Demon said, his voice carefully neutral. "The ones from 20 years ago, of course. They're in the West section. I'll have them brought to your study within the hour." No need. I'll wait. Silence. Then Benedict's knowing tone. As you wish, Your Majesty. They're on the upper shelves. Perhaps your new cataloger can assist you. I wanted to vanish, to melt into the books and become just another forgotten volume. Instead, I carefully climbed down the ladder, my legs shaking, and turned to face him. Demon stood in a shaft of afternoon light, dust motes swirling around him like tiny stars. He'd been working. I could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the slight dishevelment of his dark hair, but his eyes found mine immediately, holding me in place with that same intensity I remembered from the Great Hall. The Northern Treaties, he said. Do you know where they are? Yes, Your Majesty. This way. I led him through the narrow corridors between shelves, hyper-aware of his presence behind me. He moved quietly for someone so large, but I could feel him there, could feel the weight of his attention like a physical touch. The northern section was in the furthest corner, where the light was dim and the air thick with the smell of old leather. I found the volume he needed and pulled it from the shelf, turning to hand it to him. He didn't take it. Instead, he stood there looking at me with an expression that made my breath catch. You've been avoiding the Great Hall, he said quietly. I was assigned to the library, Your Majesty. That's not what I meant. The servants still eat in the main kitchen, take their breaks in the courtyard. But you stay here. Benedict says you barely leave except to sleep. The work is extensive. I didn't want to fall behind. Eliana. My name in his voice sounded different, softer. Are you hiding from me or from my court? The question caught me off guard. The honest answer was both, but I couldn't say that. Couldn't admit that every time I closed my eyes I saw red silk and amber eyes, and the ghost of a love that had ended in blood. I'm doing the job you gave me, Your Majesty. Nothing more. Nothing more. He repeated, something bitter in his tone. He finally took the book from my hands, his fingers brushing mine for just a moment. The contact sent electricity racing up my arm. And if I asked you to do more? If I asked you to join the evening meal in the hall, to show my court that you're under my protection? I would obey, Your Majesty. That's not what I'm asking. He set the book aside on a nearby table, his full attention now on me. I'm asking if you would want to, if you would choose to, given the option. My heart hammered against my ribs. This felt dangerous, this conversation. Like standing at the edge of a cliff, wind pulling at my clothes, one step from falling. Why does it matter what I want? Because... He stopped, frustration flickering across his features. Because I'm tired of treating you like a servant when you remind me so much of what it means to be human. Because my sister dressed you as a ghost to wound me, but instead, you became real. Because every night for 2 weeks, I've walked past this tower and thought about climbing the stairs. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and vulnerable. Your Majesty, demon, he said. When we're alone, call me demon, please. It felt like crossing a line, speaking his name, like acknowledging something that shouldn't exist between an alpha king and a human slave. Demon, I whispered, testing the word. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't know how to be anything except afraid. Neither do I. He smiled then, sad and small. Neither do I. His hand lifted, and this time he didn't stop himself. His fingers touched my cheek, gentle as a prayer, and I realized I was crying without knowing when the tears had started. She would have liked you, he said softly. Elena. She would have said you have a brave heart. Before I could respond, before I could process the enormity of what was happening, footsteps echoed from the main floor. Benedict's voice called out, Your Majesty, Lord Rowan is here. He says it's urgent. Demon's hand dropped. The moment shattered like glass. I have to go, he said, already stepping back, already rebuilding the walls. But, Eliana, come to the hall tonight. Let them see you're not afraid. Then he was gone, taking the treaty book and leaving me alone in the dimness with a heart that wouldn't stop racing, and the ghost of his touch still warm on my skin. I leaned against the shelves, trying to catch my breath, trying to understand what had just happened. The dead don't stay buried, Benedict had said. But maybe the living didn't either. Maybe they just learned new ways to reach for light, even when darkness seemed inevitable. Tonight, I thought, I would go to the hall tonight, and perhaps, just perhaps, I would stop hiding from whatever this was becoming. The great hall felt different when you entered by choice rather than command. I stood at the threshold that evening, wearing a simple gray dress that Mira had helped me press, my pale hair braided and pinned away from my face. Nothing like the red silk that had caused such chaos, nothing that would draw attention or summon ghosts. But heads still turned. The evening meal was less formal than the moon gathering, but the hall still thrummed with power and politics. Wolves in human form filled the long tables, their conversations a low rumble beneath the crackle of fire in the great hearths. I recognized faces from that night. Lord Cassius sneering into his wine, several council members deep in discussion, nobles whose names I'd never learned laughing at some shared joke, and at the high table, Demon sat with Rowan at his right hand, and Lady Morgana at his left. He saw me immediately, his posture shifting almost imperceptibly. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and something passed between us. Recognition, promise, fear. Well, well. Morgana's voice carried across the hall like a blade. The little librarian emerges from her tower. Come, dear, sit with us. It was a command disguised as invitation, a trap laid with honey and steel. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I thought of Demon's words. Let them see you're not afraid. I walked the length of the hall with my head high, feeling every eye track my progress. The servants' table was near the back, far from the nobility, but Morgana gestured to an empty seat at the high table itself, between her and a grizzled warrior, whose scars suggested he'd seen more battles than years. Your Majesty, I said, curtsying to Demon. Lady Morgana, thank you for the invitation. Oh, it wasn't my invitation. Morgana smiled that sharp smile. My brother insisted. Apparently, he's taken an interest in your education. Tell me, have the dusty old books been treating you well? The warrior beside me snorted. Leave the girl alone, Morgana. She's got more spine than half the nobles here if she's willing to sit at this table. General Theron speaks the truth. Rowan leaned forward, his gray eyes kind. Welcome, Eliana. I'm glad to see you've survived Benedict's impossible standards. The last 3 catalogers quit within a week. The work is challenging, I said carefully, but rewarding. Diplomatic and honest, Rowan grinned. I like her even more. Servants began bringing food, roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables glazed with butter and herbs. My stomach growled at the sight, reminding me that I'd barely eaten lunch. Too nervous about tonight to manage more than a few bites. Demon hadn't spoken since my arrival, but I felt his attention like a weight. He was listening to every word, watching every interaction, his body tense as if prepared to intervene at the first sign of trouble. So tell us, Morgana said, cutting delicately into her meat. What secrets have you uncovered in all those records? Surely something scandalous. Every family has skeletons buried in their history. I've found nothing but admiration for your lineage, my lady. The Ashford family has protected these territories for generations. How perfectly diplomatic, almost as if you've been coached. Her eyes slid to Demon, then back to me. Or perhaps you're simply clever enough to know which answers keep you safe. Morgana. Demon's voice was quiet, but edged with warning. Enough. I'm simply making conversation, brother. Surely you don't object to me getting to know your protégé. The pause before protégé was deliberate, laden with implication. Around us, conversations had quieted. People were listening now, waiting to see how this would play out. I object to you using conversation as a weapon, Demon said, setting down his goblet with deliberate care. If you have something to say it directly. Very well. Morgana turned fully toward me, her beautiful face a mask of concern that didn't reach her eyes. I worry about you, dear Eliana. You're human, vulnerable, alone in a palace full of predators. And my brother's attention, however well-intentioned, only makes you a bigger target. Surely you've noticed the whispers? The speculation about why the king suddenly cares so much about a servant girl. My cheeks burned, but I met her gaze steadily. I'm grateful for His Majesty's protection. Without it, I would still be scrubbing floors and dodging nobles who think servants exist for their entertainment. Cassius choked on his wine. Several people laughed, genuine laughter that broke the tension like a stone through glass. She's got teeth, General Theron said approvingly, hidden under all that politeness, but they're there. Indeed. Morgana's smile had gone brittle. One wonders where she learned to bite back. Certainly not from her years of servitude. My mother taught me, I said, surprised by my own boldness. She said that dignity isn't something others can give or take away. It's something you choose to carry, even when the world tells you you're not worthy of it. Silence fell, different from before. This time it felt like consideration rather than anticipation. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman, Rowan said gently. What happened to her? She died 5 years ago, an illness that the healers couldn't cure. I was brought here to work off her debts. 5 years. Demon's voice was rough. He was looking at me now, really looking. And I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. 5 years ago, when he'd lost Elena. When I'd lost my mother. 2 griefs running parallel, 2 wounds that had never properly healed. I'm sorry, he said. And the words carried weight beyond simple condolence. I didn't know. How could you, Your Majesty? I was just another servant, one of hundreds. You were never just anything, he said so quietly I almost didn't hear it. The moment stretched between us, intimate despite the crowded hall. Then Morgana cleared her throat, the sound like a knife scraping across stone. How touching. Perhaps we should compose a ballad. The King and the Servant Girl. It would be quite popular, I'm sure. Sister. Demon turned to her, and his expression had gone cold. I think you've entertained us enough for one evening. Perhaps you should retire early. It was a dismissal. A public one. Morgana's face went pale with fury, but she couldn't refuse without openly challenging his authority. She stood, her movements sharp and precise. Of course, Your Majesty, I wouldn't want to overstay my welcome. Her eyes found mine one last time. Do be careful, little librarian. Even the safest towers can burn. Then she swept from the hall, leaving a wake of uncomfortable silence. Well, General Theron said after a moment, that was subtle as a war hammer. The tension broke. Conversations resumed, though more subdued than before. I picked at my food, my appetite gone, wondering what price I'd just paid for standing my ground. You shouldn't have provoked her, Demon said quietly, his voice pitched for my ears only. She's dangerous when she feels threatened. I didn't provoke her. I just refused to be intimidated. That's the same thing to someone like Morgana. He paused, then added, but I'm glad you did it anyway. I looked at him then. Really looked. This close, I could see the exhaustion carved into his features, the weight he carried that went beyond simple leadership. He was tired, bone-deep tired, in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Why did you ask me here tonight? I whispered. It would have been safer for everyone if I'd stayed invisible, because I'm tired of safe, he said. Because Elena spent 6 months hiding from court politics, trying to stay out of sight, and it didn't save her. Because... He stopped, jaw clenching. Because maybe I'm tired of being afraid. Before I could respond, Rowan leaned across the table. Demon, we need to discuss the patrol schedules. There's been another sighting near the eastern border. The king's expression shifted, the personal man vanishing behind the ruler's mask. When? This afternoon. Same area as before. Whatever they're planning, it's not finished. We'll discuss it after dinner. Demon stood, the entire hall immediately quieting. Everyone enjoy your meal. General Theron, Rowan, my study in 1 hour. He looked down at me one last time. Eliana, have someone escort you back to the servants' quarters when you're finished. Don't walk alone. Then he was gone, taking Rowan and several guards with him, leaving me at the high table surrounded by nobles who now looked at me with varying degrees of curiosity, calculation, and hostility. I finished eating as quickly as politeness allowed, then fled. The corridors were dark as I made my way back, lit only by torches spaced too far apart. I should have asked for an escort as Demon commanded, but I couldn't bear the thought of more eyes on me, more whispers following my wake. I was halfway to the servants' wing when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, too fast, not bothering to hide their approach. I spun, my heart leaping into my throat. But it wasn't Morgana or Cassius or any of the nobles I'd feared. It was a man I didn't recognize. Younger, with wild eyes and clothes that didn't match palace fashion. His scent was wrong too, even to my dull human nose. Wild and sharp and dangerous. Rogue. "You're her," he said, his voice rough with barely contained rage. "The human whore the king's protecting. They said you looked like her. Said he's gone soft over a weak little thing with pale hair." I backed away slowly, my mind racing. How had he gotten into the palace, past the guards and the patrols and all the security that had been doubled since the attack? "I don't want trouble," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just let me pass." "Can't do that. You're the message. You die. And the king knows we can reach anyone at all." He moved closer, and I saw the glint of a blade in his hand. "Don't worry, I'll make it quick." Quicker than they made it for Elena anyway. Terror flooded my veins, but with it came something else. Rage. Pure, burning rage at the unfairness of it all. At being targeted for crimes I didn't commit. For resemblances I couldn't help. For having the audacity to survive in a world that wanted me dead. My mother's voice echoed in my mind. "When everyone else shows their teeth, show your heart." "She was brave," I said, still backing away but meeting his eyes. "Elena. I read about her. She died trying to save others, didn't she? Protecting people weaker than herself. Is that what you're doing? Proving your courage by killing an unarmed servant girl in a dark corridor?" He hesitated just for a second, just long enough. I screamed. Not a small cry for help, but a full-throated scream that echoed off the stone walls and carried through the palace like an alarm. The rogue lunged, but he was too late. Footsteps thundered toward us, guards responding to the sound. The man cursed and ran, disappearing down a side corridor with inhuman speed. I collapsed against the wall, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. Guards poured around the corner, weapons drawn, surrounding me in a protective circle. "Are you hurt?" The lead guard knelt beside me. "Did he touch you?" "No." I screamed before he could. He ran that way. Half the guards took off in pursuit while the rest remained, forming a wall between me and potential danger. Within minutes, more people arrived. General Theron, Rowan, and finally Demon himself, still wearing the formal clothes from dinner, his expression terrible in its fury. "What happened?" His voice was deadly quiet as he crouched before me. "Tell me everything." I did, my voice shaking but clear. When I described what the rogue had said, about Elena, about me being a message, Demon's hands clenched into fists so tight I heard bones creak. "They got inside," he said, turning to Theron. "How did they get inside?" "We're searching now, Your Majesty, but if he's already fled, then find how he entered and seal it. Double the guards on every entrance. Triple them on the servants' quarters." Demon turned back to me, and some of the fury faded, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "You could have died. If you hadn't screamed, but I did." I found myself reaching out, my hand touching his arm without thinking. "I'm alive. I'm safe. For now." He covered my hand with his, the touch warm and solid and real. But Morgana was right about one thing. My attention does make you a target, and I can't. His voice broke slightly. "I can't lose someone else, not like that. Not again." "Then teach me," I said, the words surprising even myself. "Teach me how to defend myself, how to survive in this world. Don't protect me by hiding me away. Protect me by making me stronger." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, then consideration. Then a smile that was small but genuine. "You continue to amaze me," he said softly. "Very well. Training starts tomorrow, but tonight, you're sleeping in the East Tower. Benedict has spare rooms, and they can be guarded more easily than the servants' quarters. Your Majesty, I can't." "You can and you will. That's not a request." He stood, pulling me up with him. "Rowan, escort her to Benedict. Theron, organize the search. I want every inch of this palace examined. No stone unturned." As Rowan led me toward the tower, I looked back once. Demon stood in the corridor surrounded by guards, but he was watching me, his expression unreadable in the flickering torchlight. The dead don't stay buried, I thought. But maybe the living could learn to fight back. And maybe, just maybe, I was tired of being afraid too. The East Tower became my sanctuary and my training ground. Benedict grumbled about the disruption, but secretly seemed pleased to have company beyond his dusty books. He gave me a small room adjacent to the library, sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a writing desk, and a window that looked out over the eastern forests. Guards were posted at the tower entrance day and night, rotating shifts that Demon personally approved. The training began at dawn the next morning. I woke to find Rowan waiting in the library, dressed in simple fighting leathers that made him look less like a nobleman and more like the warrior he clearly was. His gray eyes assessed me with professional interest. "The king says you want to learn to defend yourself," he said without preamble. "That's admirable, but understand. You're human. You'll never be as strong or fast as a wolf. What we can do is teach you to be smart, aware, and difficult to kill. That's all I'm asking for." He smiled. "Good. Let's begin." The next weeks blurred into a rhythm of learning and transformation. Mornings were spent with Rowan, who taught me how to read body language, how to use an attacker's momentum against them, where the vulnerable points were on both human and wolf forms. He was patient when I struggled and encouraging when I succeeded, treating me not as a fragile thing to be protected, but as a student worth teaching. "You're getting better," he said one morning, after I'd successfully dodged 3 of his strikes in a row. "Your instincts are improving. You're starting to trust yourself." "I'm starting to understand why Demon keeps you close," I replied, breathing hard. "You make people believe they can be more than they are." "That's because they can be. They just need someone to see it first." He offered me water, his expression thoughtful. "He's different since you came, more present, less haunted, or more haunted by different ghosts." "Perhaps, but at least he's feeling something beyond duty and grief." Rowan paused, then added quietly, "Elena would have approved of you. She believed people were defined by their choices, not their circumstances. You've proven that." After training came hours in the library, cataloging records and learning from Benedict. The old scholar taught me more than just organizational systems. He taught me the palace's true history, the political currents that ran beneath surface courtesy, the alliances and betrayals that shaped the kingdom. "Knowledge is power," he'd say, "especially for those who have no other power to claim." And in the evenings, Demon came. Not every night, but often enough that I began listening for his footsteps on the stairs. He'd appear in the library doorway looking exhausted from council meetings and patrol reports, and we'd talk. About books, about history, about nothing and everything. He told me about Elena, not the idealized memory, but the real woman, flawed and brave and stubbornly optimistic even when the world proved dangerous. "She believed love could change things," he said one night, standing by my window as the sun set over the forests. "That if enough people chose compassion over violence, the world would transform." I thought she was naive. Now I think maybe she was just braver than the rest of us. "What changed your mind?" He turned to look at me, and the expression in his amber eyes made my breath catch. "You did. You're human and vulnerable in a palace full of predators, but you don't let that make you cruel. You still show your heart, even when teeth would be safer." My mother's teaching. She must have been remarkable. She was, like Elena was. I moved closer, drawn by something I didn't fully understand. "You loved her very much." "I did. I do." He said it simply, without shame. "But she's gone, and I'm still here. And lately I've been wondering if maybe the greatest betrayal isn't moving forward. It's refusing to, out of fear of dishonoring the past." His hand lifted to my face, fingers tracing the line of my jaw with heartbreaking gentleness. "You're not her replacement, Eliana. You're not a ghost or a substitute. You're yourself. Brave and kind and entirely your own person. And I—" He stopped, searching for words. "I find myself wanting to know everything about you, not because you remind me of what I lost, but because you make me remember what it means to hope." My heart was hammering so hard, I thought he must hear it. "Demon, I know it's complicated. I know the court will talk, that Morgana will scheme, that being close to me puts you in danger. But I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my skin. "Tell me to stop. Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll walk away. I'll keep you safe from a distance and never burden you with this again. And if I don't want you to walk away?" The question hung between us for a heartbeat. Then his lips met mine, and the world narrowed to just that point of contact. Gentle at first, almost hesitant, then deeper as I responded. His hand cradled the back of my head, fingers tangling in my pale hair, while his other arm circled my waist and pulled me close. It felt like falling and flying simultaneously, like every moment of tension and fear and longing that had built between us finally finding release. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I'm probably going to regret this," he murmured. "Probably," I agreed. "But maybe some things are worth the risk." The next morning, the entire palace knew. Servants whispered in corners. Nobles exchanged knowing looks over breakfast. Lady Morgana's smile was sharp enough to draw blood when we passed in the corridor. But Demon faced it all with a quiet dignity that dared anyone to question his choices. "Let them talk," he said when I expressed concern. "I've spent 5 years living as a ghost. I'm done apologizing for choosing to feel alive." The council meeting that afternoon was tense. I wasn't present, but Rowan told me about it afterward. How Morgana had tried to force a vote on inappropriate relationships between royalty and servants, how Cassius had supported her with barely concealed glee, how General Theron had shut them both down with a speech about how the king's personal life was his own concern as long as it didn't compromise the kingdom's security. "And then Demon stood up," Rowan said, his eyes gleaming with barely suppressed laughter, "and announced that you would be offered a position as an official palace historian and cultural advisor. Not a servant, but a valued member of court with appropriate status and protection." I stared at him. "He did what?" "Promoted you. Publicly. Effectively removing any ammunition about improper relations between royalty and servants. You're no longer a servant, Eliana. You're officially one of us." It should have felt like victory, but all I could think was how much more danger I was in now. Not as invisible prey, but as a visible target. The attack came 3 days later. It was late afternoon, and I was alone in the library. Benedict had gone to meet with other scholars about some historical dispute, and my guards were stationed at the tower entrance as usual. I was deep in a translation of an ancient treaty when I smelled smoke. Not the pleasant smell of hearth fires, but something acrid and wrong, chemical, deliberate. I ran to the window and looked down to see flames licking up the tower's base, spreading impossibly fast. Someone had set fire to the east tower, and the old wood and parchment would burn like kindling. "Guards!" I screamed, running for the door. But when I reached it, it wouldn't open. Locked or barred from the outside, I couldn't tell which. I pounded on the heavy oak, shouting for help as smoke began seeping under the door, trapped. I was trapped in a tower that was becoming my funeral pyre. Think. I had to think. The window was too high to jump from without serious injury, but there was a balcony on the far side used for hanging tapestries to air. If I could reach it, if the fire hadn't spread that far yet, I grabbed what books I could carry, the most valuable, the irreplaceable ones, and ran through the library maze toward the balcony. Smoke was thicker now, making my eyes water and my lungs burn. I could hear the fire roaring below, could feel heat rising through the floorboards. The balcony door was stuck. I slammed my shoulder against it once, twice, 3 times before it finally burst open. Fresh air hit my face, sweet and cool and precious. Below, I could see guards running toward the tower, people shouting and pointing, and Demon was already halfway up the tower wall, climbing with inhuman speed and strength, his face contorted with fear and rage. "Eliana!" His voice carried over the chaos. "The balcony, jump, I'll catch you." It was too far. Even with wolf reflexes, the angle was wrong, the distance too great. But the fire was seconds behind me, hungry and consuming, and I had no other choice. I set the books carefully on the balcony floor, saving what I could of Benedict's life work, then climbed onto the railing. "Trust me," Demon shouted. "Just trust me and jump." I thought of my mother, who'd taught me that showing your heart was strength. I thought of Elena, who'd been brave enough to love despite the danger. I thought of everything I'd learned in these past weeks, about courage and choice and refusing to let fear define you, and I jumped. The fall lasted forever, and no time at all. Wind rushed past me, and I had a moment to think, this is how I die. Then strong arms caught me, impossibly, miraculously. Demon had leaped from the wall at precisely the right moment, catching me mid-air and twisting his body to take the impact as we hit the ground. We rolled together across the grass, and when we stopped, he was curled around me, his body a shield between me and any possible harm. "Are you hurt?" His hands were everywhere, checking for injuries, his voice rough with panic. "Eliana, answer me." I'm fine. I was crying without knowing when the tears had started. "The books. I left them on the balcony." "Damn the books." He pulled me tighter, his face buried in my hair. "You could have died. You nearly—" His voice broke. Around us, guards were fighting the fire with water and magic, but I barely noticed. All I could focus on was the man holding me like I was the most precious thing in the world, shaking with relief and residual fear. "It was Morgana," Rowan said, appearing beside us with his sword drawn and fury in his eyes. "We found her hired men. They've confessed everything. The lock on the door, the accelerant used to make the fire spread faster. She tried to kill Eliana." Demon slowly released me and stood, his expression transforming into something I'd never seen before. Not anger. Something colder, more absolute. The Alpha King in all his terrible power. "Where is she?" "Trying to flee through the eastern gate. Theron has her contained." "Good." Demon turned to me one last time, his hand cupping my cheek. "Stay with Rowan. I'll return shortly." Then he was gone, moving with predatory grace toward whatever reckoning awaited his sister. The next hours passed in a blur. The fire was contained and eventually extinguished, though the tower's lower floors were destroyed. Benedict returned to find his life's work partially saved, the books I'd rescued and the upper floors that had survived, and actually hugged me, his old eyes wet with tears. "Foolish, brave girl," he muttered. "Could have been killed for some dusty old books." "They were your dusty old books," I said. "That makes them worth saving." Demon returned as night fell, looking exhausted, but resolute. Morgana had been stripped of her title and lands, banished from the kingdom with only what she could carry. Several nobles who'd supported her schemes had been similarly dealt with. Cassius was under investigation for his involvement. "It's done," he said quietly, finding me in a guest room where I'd been given temporary quarters. "She can't hurt you anymore. No one can. What will happen now?" "Now?" He sat beside me on the bed, taking my hand in both of his. "Now we rebuild. The tower, the court, everything that was broken. And we do it differently this time, with more truth, less fear." He paused, then added, "If you'll stay. If you'll give this world, give me another chance." I looked at our joined hands, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The red dress and the ghost it summoned. The library and the knowledge it contained. The training that had taught me I could be more than I believed. The fire that had nearly killed me and the leap of faith that had saved me. "I'll stay," I said. "Not because you're a king or because I'm afraid to leave, but because I choose to, because you make me want to be brave." His smile was like sunrise breaking over mountains, tentative and beautiful and full of possibility. "Then we'll be brave together." He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And for the first time since my mother died, I felt like I was home. The rebuilding took months. The East Tower was restored, better than before, with safety measures that would prevent any such attack in the future. Benedict oversaw the reconstruction personally, muttering about foolish nobles and their dramatic gestures, while secretly ensuring every detail was perfect. I took my new position seriously, working with scholars from across the kingdom to preserve histories and forge new cultural connections. The court slowly adjusted to my presence, the whispers fading as they realized I wasn't going anywhere. Rowan became my closest friend, always ready with an encouraging word or a training session when I needed to work out frustration. General Theron treated me with gruff respect. Even the servants who'd once avoided me began to warm, seeing that power hadn't changed who I was at my core. And Demon courted me properly, as if I were a noble lady rather than a former servant. He took me riding through the forests, showed me the borders of his kingdom, introduced me to pack leaders and diplomats as his partner rather than his possession. We talked long into the night about philosophy and justice, about how to build a kingdom that valued compassion alongside strength. 6 months after the fire, he asked me to marry him. We were in the reconstructed library, surrounded by books and memories, when he dropped to one knee and offered me a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Not Elena's ring, because I wasn't Elena and never would be, but a different kind of promise. "I'm not asking you to be my queen," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I'm asking you to be my partner, my equal, the person who reminds me that strength and gentleness aren't opposites but complements. Will you marry me, Eliana? Not because kingdoms require heirs or politics demand alliances, but because I love you for exactly who you are?" I thought about the girl who'd put on a red dress and accidentally summoned a ghost. The girl who'd been afraid and invisible and certain she'd never matter to anyone. And I thought about the woman I'd become, trained and educated and brave enough to jump from burning towers because she trusted someone would catch her. "Yes," I said, pulling him up to kiss him. 1,000 times yes. The wedding was held in spring, when the forests bloomed and the air smelled of renewal. Wolves came from every territory, humans from neighboring kingdoms, creating a gathering that transcended old boundaries. I wore white, not red, my own choice, my own color, untouched by ghosts or schemes. Benedict officiated, his old voice strong as he spoke of love that persisted through loss, of courage that chose compassion, of two people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided to walk toward light. When Demon kissed me as his wife and queen, the crowd roared its approval, wolves and humans alike celebrating not just a union, but a transformation. I was no longer the invisible servant girl. I was Eliana Ashford, Queen of the Northern Territories, proof that dignity was chosen and power could be gentle. That night, standing on the balcony of our chambers, Demon held me close as we watched the celebrations continue below. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Staying, choosing this life." I thought about everything I'd survived, everything I'd learned, everyone I'd become. "Never. Do you?" "Not for a single moment." He turned me to face him, his amber eyes reflecting starlight. "Elena taught me how to love. You taught me how to hope again. Both are gifts I'll carry forever." "Then we'll carry them together," I said. "All the ghosts and all the possibilities. All the fear and all the courage. That's what it means to be alive." He kissed me then, and somewhere in the forests beyond the palace, wolves howled their approval to the moon. The sound no longer frightened me. Instead, it felt like welcome, like belonging, like coming home to a place I'd earned through every choice, every risk, every moment of showing my heart instead of my teeth. I was human in a world of wolves. I was a former servant who'd become a queen. I was a girl who'd worn the wrong dress and found the right life. And I was finally, completely, triumphantly myself.